I watched the security footage 3 times. Station 7 had been offline for over a decade. Power cut at the breaker, machines locked and tagged, barrier tape across the entrance. Nobody worked there. Nobody was supposed to go anywhere near it. But on the recording, the machines were running. No one in frame. The aisle empty, the section dark, and the sound perfectly clear on the audio. Metal on metal, steady, rhythmic. The sound of something that knew exactly what it was doing. Then at 2:14, the camera went dark. 3 seconds. It came back. The machines had stopped. I watched it a 4th time. Then I sat very still and thought about the fact that this had happened every single night for the past 6 weeks. Every night, and nobody had mentioned it to me. Not once. I'd been on nights at that factory for 2 years by the time any of this started. It's a large building, pressed metal components, industrial scale, the kind of place that's relentlessly loud and crowded during the day and becomes something else entirely after midnight. 8 of us on the night shift spread across a floor designed for 60. The active lines running in the center, the hum and rhythm of them filling the space. Everything beyond that, the old sections, the decommissioned wings, the east end, sitting in the dark at the edges of everything, quiet and large and patient. You learn a building on nights. Every sound earns a name, the expansion joints ticking as the structure cools, the ventilation system cycling on the hour, the specific high rattle of the loading bay door when the wind comes from the north. After enough shifts you stop registering them consciously, the way you stop hearing your own breathing. Station 7 was at the far end of the east wing, through a set of double doors, past the parts storage racks. At the end of a section that had been dark for longer than I'd worked it, the barrier tape across the entrance had faded from yellow to a pale dirty cream. The machines there were a different generation from the active line, older, heavier, built in the era when things were made to last indefinitely rather than be replaced. They looked like they could still run. That had always been the impression, like they were waiting rather than finished. My rounds took me past those double doors twice a shift. I'd push through, skin the east section visually, confirm nothing leaking or burning, come back. 4 minutes. I had done it hundreds of times without thinking about it. The first night I heard the sound coming from that section, I stopped walking and stood at the doors and listened for about 30 seconds. Metal on metal, coming from the far end, steady and low. I told myself it was the ventilation doing something unusual. Old ducts, odd acoustics, sound traveling strangely through the structure. These things happen. I've worked in old buildings long enough to know they make noises that resist simple explanation. I walked back to the active floor and finished my shift. I almost believed it. That's the part that stayed with me after. How close I came to just letting it go. The sound came back the next night. I checked my watch the moment I heard it. 2:11. I noted that it was the same time as the previous night before I had consciously decided to remember the previous night's time. My body had stored it without asking me. That should have told me something about what I already knew at some level. I pushed through the double doors. The east wing was dark the way it always was. Emergency lighting only. The faint green wash from the exit signs along the floor. Just enough to navigate. Just enough to see the shapes of the old machines rising on either side of the aisle. Large and still, except for the sound coming from the far end, which was getting clearer as I walked. Steady, patient, the sound of something that had no particular reason to stop. I kept walking. At 15 meters the sound stopped. Not winding down, not slowing. Stopped, complete, instant, total. The way a sound stops when whatever is producing it becomes aware that something in its environment has changed. I stood in the aisle and did not move. The machines at Station 7 were dark and motionless through the gloom. Barrier tape undisturbed. I stood there long enough for my eyes to fully adjust and found nothing that should have been making that noise. I walked to the nearest machine and put my hand flat on the metal. Cold, same temperature as the air. If something had been running, it hadn't been running long enough to generate heat, or it generated no heat at all. I moved that second thought to one side careful, the way you move something fragile, and went back to the office. I logged an anomalous sound, source unidentified. The site manager read it in the morning and said it was the ventilation. He said the east wing ducting was old and did strange things. He said it had been noted before. I asked when it had been noted before. He said he'd checked the old logs. He never came back to me. That should have been the end of it. I want to be honest about that. There was a version of events where I logged it, accepted the explanation, and moved on with my life. But the sound came back every night. Same time, same rhythm, same instant silence the moment I got close enough. And the thing about a sound that stops when you approach it is that it creates a specific kind of pull, not courage. Something more uncomfortable than that. The feeling that turning back is somehow worse. That the thing you don't confirm will follow you in a way that the thing you do confirm won't. So after a week of this, I went to the security office and pulled the footage. I looked at 6 nights of recordings from the 4 cameras covering the east wing. The pattern was identical every time. Audio activity beginning around 2:09. Camera on Station 7 going dark at exactly 2:14 for exactly 3 seconds. Audio stopped on return. The 4 cameras covering the rest of the east wing showed nothing. Empty aisle, still machines, green light on the floor. I went through each night twice. On the sixth night, a Wednesday, for days before I sat in that security office, there was something at the left edge of the Station 7 camera frame. I almost missed it the first pass. I caught it on the second. The camera was old, the image low resolution, the area dark. But just inside the barrier tape, at the near end of Station 7, there was a shape. Upright, still, the rough dimensions of a standing person, facing away from the lens. At 2:14, the screen went dark for 3 seconds. When it came back, the shape was gone. I sat with that image for a long time. I made myself work through every alternative explanation I could construct. Camera artifact, shadow, the exit sign at an angle, the shape of the old equipment misread in low resolution. I am not someone who jumps to conclusions. I have always been the person in the room who looks for the straightforward answer first. I sat there and I tried every straightforward answer I had, and not one of them held up against what I was looking at. There had been a person at Station 7, or something the shape of a person. And in 3 seconds of darkness it had gone. I went back on shift the following Tuesday. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found. I did my first hour checks, logged the line readings, did the loading bay walk. Normal, deliberate. I wanted to feel like a person going about a reasonable job, and for 2 hours I mostly managed it. At 2:09 I was standing at the double doors to the east wing. My hands were steady. It was my chest that was doing something, not pain, just pressure. The kind that sits behind your sternum when your body is processing something your mind hasn't fully caught up to. I noted it. I pushed through the doors. I walked without slowing, not performing confidence, just not letting my pace make the decision. The sound filled the wing as I got deeper in. At 10 meters I could feel it faintly through the floor. Not just hearing it, feeling it. A real, physical vibration in the concrete under my boots, which meant something with mass was moving at the far end of this section, which meant this was not a recording or an artifact or an acoustical illusion. I kept walking. At 5 meters it stopped. Station 7, barrier tape, machines dark, air colder than the rest of the wing, not dramatically, but the kind of cold that is specific and local, that collects in spaces where air has stopped moving for reasons that have nothing to do with ventilation. I looked at the floor before I looked at anything else. Footprints in the dust. Clear, recent. The dust in this section had not been disturbed in years, and these were fresh. Someone had crossed the tape, walked to the main press, stood in front of it. The dust was compressed in 2 long parallel marks in front of the machine. The kind of compression that happens when a person stands in one position without shifting their weight for an extended period, then walked back. I looked at my watch. 2:13. I looked at the security camera at the far end of the aisle, the small red indicator light that told me it was recording. I thought about the shape on the Wednesday footage, facing away from the lens. I thought about the fact that I was now standing in the exact position that shape had been standing in, and the camera was pointing directly at me, and in less than 60 seconds that camera was going to go dark. My mouth was dry. I noticed that. My feet had done what they'd done in the aisle the first time, just stopped, declined the next step without consulting. I was standing very still in front of Station 7 in the cold and the quiet, and I was thinking clearly, and I was more frightened than I had been of anything in a long time. At 2:14 the indicator light went out. The cold sharpened immediately, not gradually, immediately, the way temperature changes when a door opens in winter. I could not see anything, not the exit signs, not the shapes of the machines, not my own hands. 3 seconds of total darkness and total silence, and the absolute certainty that I was not alone. I did not move. I did not make a sound. The light came back. I was standing in the aisle, the footprints in the dust exactly as they had been, the barrier tape undisturbed, the machines still. Everything exactly as it had been before 2:14, except for one thing I noted and filed and did not look at directly on my way back through the double doors. The second set of footprints in the dust, the ones that had been pointing toward the press, were now pointing the other way, toward the doors, toward me. I walked back through the double doors at a steady pace. I finished my rounds. I logged the shift. I drove home and lay on my bed with my eyes open until it was light outside. I handed in my notice the following week. Personal reasons. They accepted it without much inquiry. Night shift workers leave. The turnover is normal. Nobody asked me anything I would have had difficulty answering honestly. On my last shift, I pulled the East Wing footage one final time. The previous night, 2:09 to 2:17. Same audio activity starting at 2:09. Camera dark at 2:14 for 3 seconds. When the image returned, the shape was in the frame, not at Station 7. It had been at Station 7 on the Wednesday footage, just inside the barrier tape, 30 meters from the camera. Now it was halfway down the aisle, 15 meters from the lens, still facing away, standing in the center of the frame in the flat gray of the camera image, facing toward the double doors, toward the active floor, toward where I would have been standing if I had come through that night. In 3 seconds of darkness it had covered 30 meters. I cloosed the file. I clocked out. I walked out of that building for the last time and I didn't look back at it. I spoke to a former colleague several months later, someone who had worked nights at that factory before I started. I asked him casually how he had found the East Wing. He was quiet for a moment, a specific kind of quiet that I recognized. The quiet of someone deciding how much to say. He said he remembered sounds from that section. He said he had always done his East Wing rounds at 1:30, back on the main floor well before 2. I asked who had told him to do it that way. He said nobody had told him. He said it was just something you knew when you were there long and something in the culture of the place. Nobody said it directly. It just got passed on. I asked him if he had ever gone in there after 2. He said no. He said he'd always been too sensible for that. I looked the factory up a few months ago. Still operating. Same address, same shift structure. In the public reviews, the kind left by workers, not customers, one post from 8 months ago, no name attached. Whatever you do, stay away from the east side after 2. Nobody told them either. That's the part that stays with me. Not what I saw in the footage, not the footprints in the dust, not the 3 seconds of darkness and what was standing next to me inside it. What stays with me is that this has been going on long enough that it became an unspoken rule. Passed from worker to worker, shift to shift, year to year. Nobody saying it directly, nobody explaining why. Just, don't go there after 2. And somewhere in that building right now, on a night shift, someone new is learning that rule. And they don't know yet what it's about. And at some point, maybe tonight, maybe next week, they're going to want to find out.